next week. See what he's doing back there. Here we go. Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of the 29th of January 2018. Before we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silent meditation, I will give a moment to Councilman John Camp.
Yes, I'd just like you all to know that one of our former colleagues, Tom Allman, who served in the 60s, the 1960s, passed away this past week at the age of 97. And I just thought I'd let everyone know. And he was just a real gentleman of a person, and over the many, many years, he was active in all types of activities for the community and business. So thank you.
Let's all rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the rear of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions listed and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, like tonight, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor planned for a future agenda. I'd also like to mention that because of our cancellation of city council meetings last week, the agenda has been altered, and we are not going to be having the hearing on open harvest this evening. So if you are here for that, we apologize, but the storm really made it so we needed to change our plans. And so we will have the hearing on open harvest next week. Will the clerk please call the first item?
Yes, our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 17.
Would anyone like to testify on any of these items? Next item, please.
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Items 1 through 3 were introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Items 4 and 7 through 14 were introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. We just have the one item, the manager application of Amy Etchen for 13 Low Enterprises LLC, doing business as Lucky's Lounge and Grill at 1101 West Bond Street. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Amy Etchen, 7301 Willow Avenue.
Ms. Etchins, please tell us about your manager application.
I applied for the manager's application. Mark asked me to because he was having troubles getting his liquor license. I've worked at Lucky's for 11 years as the bar manager. I am there every day from 9 to 2, and then I work a couple nights a week as well.
Questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, that's all we have for you.
Okay, do I sign?
Please do. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, next item.
That's it, then.
Can we vote on this?
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. And just a reminder, we do request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Next are our public hearing resolutions. Item 19 is approving Bodega's Alley as a Keno satellite at 1418 O Street.
Hello.
My name is Ryan Detlison. I am the owner of Bodegas. My address 811 South 38th Street Court.
Okay, tell us about your application as a Keno satellite.
I'm just looking to add Keno for some additional revenue downtown.
Okay, questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
You bet.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Thanks.
Next item, please.
All right, next is item 20, accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of December 1st through the 31st, 2017.
Is there anyone here who would like to testify on a claim against the city? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 21, approving an operating agreement between the city on behalf of the Parks and Rec Department and Friends of Woods Tennis Incorporated, governing the ongoing operation of the new Woods Tennis Center facility for a 10-year term.
Is there anyone here who is going to speak on this item? Come forward, please. I thought I recognized you sitting there.
I'm Kevin Heim. I'm the Executive Director at Woods Tennis Center. And just wanted to speak, obviously, on behalf of, hopefully, approval of this agreement. We've had a great agreement with the city. For those that aren't aware, we've, ourselves, the Friends of Woods Tennis, and our predecessor have operated the tennis center since approximately 1980, 4. We've been a nonprofit now since 2009, and the agreement to operate as a nonprofit with the city took place in 2010. It's been a great partnership. It's been wonderful to work with the City Parks Department, and for those that aren't aware, we had the capital campaign and built a new indoor facility. We've made some adjustments to the outdoor courts as well, and our numbers just continue to grow and grow. And we had joked, I guess, in a sense, that we were bursting at the seams with the bubbles, and we really are pretty much at capacity. So we would love to see this approval, and we look forward to hopefully the next 10 years and longer.
Questions for Kevin? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Sorry, is there anyone from Parks and Rec here? No? Is
Item,
Tim?
please.
No, not your item? Okay.
Please call the next item.
All right, next is item 22, naming the new dog run at Peterson Park as Stransky Dog Run.
Is anyone here from? No. Going to testify on this item for us? Okay.
All right, next then are our public hearing ordinances second reading. Item 23, text amendment 17013, amending sections 26.15.030, 26.19.031, 27.60.020, 27.64.010, and 27.65.070 of the Lincoln Municipal Code to provide provisions to implement computer-aided design, CAD standards for preliminary plats, final plats, use permits, community unit plans, and planned unit developments.
Oh, I get to start?
Oh, I'm happy to start.
Thanks, David. Well, I know if you start that I won't have a chance, so I'll just go ahead and start. Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer. And so what Mr. Young and I are bringing forward tonight is something that we worked on for a long time that I'm super excited about. And I know the commissioners always make fun of me when I say I'm excited about nerdy engineering things. But what this interlocal agreement does is it creates, for both the city and the county, CAD layering standards, and electronic submittals for plats. So what happens is somebody submits a plat, and they submit it in a PDF form, and then we have a technician at the county that goes in and redraws the entire plat. Turns out there's a technician at the city that does the same thing to make sure that it's right. And then there's another nuance at the city that with EO drawings, the consultant does the EO drawings, and then there's a technician at the city that, once they're approved, redraws them all to get them electronically into the system because they are submitted in PDF form. So this interlocal modernizes all that, but not only does it do that, because we will now be getting electronic drawings, we are able to check them much more quickly because we can simply overlay them in the system, and it saves about 75% of the time. So, and then there's another step to it. So the way the old system was laid out with non-electronic submittals of drawings, people in county engineering drew up those plats, people in public works drew up those plats, and then the plat is filed at the assessor's office, and guess what? Somebody draws up that plat again to make sure it's right. And so this will unilaterally across the county and the city dramatically save us a lot of time and allow us to expedite the plat process. And so that's why I'm so super excited about something that is so super nerdy, because it really is going to mean a lot to both of our organizations for efficiency.
You know, David Young, Public Works, I don't think I could have said any of that better. But specifically what we're doing today is modifying our two ordinances to require a CAD submission. All plats today are drawn in computer-aided design software. What we have done partnering with the county is to create one standard, which the county and city will both use for plan review, subdivision plats, and final plats. Very simply, this is our first step into this realm. Our next step will be construction plans for the city and county using the same design standards. That way, when the county or city road joins up, we don't have to redraw anything. We agree basically to the same language in the software. Those standards are available to download for the public in MicroStation, AutoCAD, and in the ArcGIS format. So we are very excited about this. It's taken a lot of work to get here.
It has.
Questions? Lyrian?
I know that you undertook a process to get input from those affected by this change. Can you just briefly describe that and what you learned and how that, modified your proposal?
For our portion, reaching out to the development community, they were excited and concerned. Excited on one hand that it would expedite the process of getting plats approved, concerned on the other hand that their intellectual property might be made available to other people. We've solved that concern by creating a standard that's applicable to all three of the major softwares and by not sharing the information. So the information comes in, it's a one-way, we import it into the system directly.
And you secured, approval from all the interested parties as you came to your final conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We got a 9-0 vote at Planning Commission and 7-0 at the County Board?
5-0.
5-0, excuse me,
5-0.
thank you. Thank you.
Seems like there are 7 of them.
Yes.
We're
So
hoping to
it
give
was
you
good.
9-0 vote, too.
I can't hope for that, but it was exciting. It was good to reach out. A lot of the developers were concerned. In the beginning, are we going to favor one piece of software over another? No. Will they have to go in and do significant work to change their software? No. We will give them seed files, and those seed files will be able to be available to any developer or engineer who wants to do this work.
Okay, Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. So it looked like 3 layers of review, and every layer of review also had redrawing. Any idea how many man hours, how much money that might save?
Our expectation is we will take a 14 business day process down to 1 business day in Public Works. And I have an example if you'd like to see why that is specifically.
Thank you.
On the monitor, as soon as it comes up here,
There we go.
this is what we would receive as part of the process. We would receive a subdivision plat. In here, we would manually redraw all of these lines and notations, manually, a technician. Furthermore, we would interpret, which you can't read the size of this, it's so small. This is usually an 11.5 by 17 sheet of paper. All of these different surveyor notes to make the pin corners line up. This creates a lot of human error, and that's the reason we needed the 3-party checking system. But it's 2017, 2018, we all use the same software now. By agreeing with the county engineer that we'll just use one standard, that eliminated all the work. Literally, you can import these things just like converting a Word document to an Excel document. And that's the software we have available to us.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else? Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 24, change of zone 17036, application of Lincoln Federal Bank Corp., care of Leo Shoemaker, for a change of zone from AG Agricultural to R3 Residential on property generally located at South 33rd Street and Wilderness Hills Boulevard.
Is there someone here to testify on this item? Okay. Next item, please.
All right, next is item 25, amending section 25.06.220, examination and registration fee of the Lincoln Municipal Code to decrease the examination fees for master mechanical contractor and journeyman mechanical technician.
Hi there, Chad Blahan, Building and Safety Department. This item is before you to decrease fees that the city charges for licensing of the mechanical contractors and journeyman mechanical contractors. The reason for this is our company that we do or adopt our codes from, the International Code Council, has no longer provides local jurisdictions for paper copy examinations. They're required to do it electronically, and so instead of paying us the money and passing that through to the ICC, the testers can go at their own schedule to a local testing facility and pay ICC directly to take that test. And so we still have $400 examination fee for the contractors that covers the city's time in administering the other 3 components of the testing process for the contractors, and then the single testing process that is left for the journeyman. The journeyman exam is being reduced from $100 to $50. So it looks like we're saving them money. We're not actually saving them money. It's just not passing through the city. And we didn't have a choice in this. That's was ICC's decision. And it will result in some convenience factor for the customers and less time involved for city staff as well. So.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next I'll call items 26 through 28. They are approving the City Center redevelopment agreement between the city and City Center Lincoln LLC relating to the redevelopment of properties generally located on Block 34, bounded by 9th and 10th Streets and P and Q Streets, and adjacent rights-of-way in downtown Lincoln, amending the fiscal year 17-18 CIP to authorize and appropriate $15 million in TIF funds for the City Center project, and authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the City Center redevelopment project. I will note for the record that we do have a request from the developer that these three items have second and third reading today since council meeting was canceled last week.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, and the applicant in this case. This is the new entryway from the airport into downtown, should the City Council agree to what we're proposing today. You have to subtract the fact that there's a car going the wrong way on the roadway, since it's a one-way. But this is the Q Street side, the back end of the Lincoln Journal side.
Could you move that mic a little bit for yourself?
I will. I'll come back over just to make sure I make use of it. This is, I think, a handsome addition to the entry of the city as people come in to see our community. And the building itself, which we are suggesting to you that you approve, will be well, in fact, it'll be the largest single project that we've done for a single building in the history of the city of Lincoln. This is an $85 million project, 70 of which comes from private sources, 15 of which comes from the use of tax increment financing. We're taking up three things today, but all of them serve a larger purpose for a project that has 35,000 square feet of retail space on the ground floor, the active edges that you want on a downtown block. It has 100 stalls of below-grade parking, adding those stalls into at least the available parking in downtown, to be used by essentially the commercial interests inside the building. 89,000 square feet of Class A commercial office space, which would be on the second and third floors. And then 238 market rate residential units in downtown Lincoln. Perhaps they'll be able to make use of the grocery store that we're hoping occupies part of the Lumberworks liner building that'll be opening. The $85 million project includes, as I said, $70 million of private investment from outside Lincoln. In fact, this is a New York developer who saw opportunity in our city and chose to come here to expand their holdings. We've reviewed it for its compliance with the downtown master plan, the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan, and the comprehensive plan, as has the Planning Commission, who voted unanimously in favor of the project. What it does is it creates a major multi-use, active-edged retail and residential mixed-use project. It completes 2 block faces of the P Street retail streetscape. And by the way, since we have in fact invested in the P Street streetscape, we've had a development at Aspen, we've had a development at the Federal Credit Union, we've had a development at 1222 P Street, we've had a development at the Kindler Hotel, and now we have this development on this block. In other words, the P Street project has been a magnet for private sector investment in downtown, and this is the largest of those investments. It also completes the design workshop design on the north side of the street, and adds what we have always hoped to happen to link Antelope Valley to the Haymarket. It activates Q Street. In fact, this will be the front door for a number of those residential units. It facilitates reduced crossing distances for pedestrians at 9th and 10th Streets and P and Q Streets. This is also part of the downtown master plan, as anybody who tries to cross those streets today knows they're very broad, fast-moving. So these will have bump outs on both sides of 9th Street and 10th Street to allow pedestrians to have a quicker access across the road. This has been part of our 2005 master plan ever since, and we will achieve it with this project. This is the Q Street side. This is the P Street side, to get a size of how large this project is. This is the corner of the P Street side, and this is essentially a night shot, or an evening shot of what the project is like. The developer is here, ready to express their sensibilities, although they tell us that, in fact, one of the reasons that they wish for this to be handled expeditiously is the desire to proceed towards those steps that are necessary to start construction. But those include moving the Lincoln Journal-Star from where it is to another location, and that'll take a period of time. So the faster that those things can be done, the more expeditiously the developer can move on to the project itself and construction. What questions can I answer for you?
Questions? John?
And maybe these would be for the developer. You've talked about the 35,000 square feet of first floor retail. Maybe that should be for the developer or his representatives.
Okay.
On the relocation of the Journal-Star and then the bank on the 10th and P corner, how does those handle? Are there going to be
The
any
bank
subsidies?
stays, and it's not part of the project area. The Lincoln Journal finds another home. They've been aware of this. They've negotiated the contract under which this is to be done. They have a window of opportunity to find a new home. Up until now, it's been somewhat hush-hush, and we're not party to that. I'm not sure what the developer can tell you if you do intend to ask them. It is their desire, I believe, to continue to be in the downtown area. That's as much as I know about the relocation process.
So will the Journal-Star handle its own relocation expenses?
They're not part of the TIF agreement. And I'm not sure what the arrangement is, if it's in the purchase price or part of the arrangement between the developer and the seller. But what you have is you have a seller who's leaving the property. It's not like where we ask somebody to leave, they don't want to leave, but because we are in the process of making them leave, that it doesn't trigger the kind of relocation costs that tenants have in buildings where we're buying it from the owner, and the tenants have to find a new place for their business.
Other questions? Cindy?
Thank you. Can you tell us what the planned uses are for the TIF financing?
Yes, and in the event, you've got a copy of the agreement in front of you.
I do.
You would look at Exhibit B1. And it's in an order. The first one, as always, is the cost of issuance, and then the city's administrative fee. And then site acquisition to the tune of $6.2 million. Site preparation, that's usually demolition and getting the building down to the land that you want. Streetscape public improvements at $1.3 million, and these include creating the walkways and spaces that we have here. It includes the P Street design on the Embassy Suites side of the block, and also the work that's done on the streets for the bump outs. So that's in the streetscape plan. Facade enhancements, there will be a high-quality exterior facade, energy enhancements, and capitalized interest. That comes to $14 million.
Okay, Lorraine?
My question was similar, but I wasn't so sure that there were set expectations about what streetscape improvements we could expect to see. You've listed the types, but could you be more specific about what will be done in the first phase, and if there's money left over, what will be done? Can you elaborate?
If you open the agreement to page 13, you'll find something in which we've basically described the streetscapes that we want. What we did was to describe the elements of the design workshop P Street design, and we wrote them into the agreement, and the developer will be responsible for those elements. Now, we've put a number here, but the obligation to perform is, I think, contained in perhaps 13 through 17. And what you find there is a description of what we expect and what they commit to building, no matter what the cost is, although we recite the cost in the TIF agreement itself. We did that so that rather than have a number, we would, and while we do have a number, that's not the limitation. Instead, we put in the design elements that are part of that whole process, particularly from 11th to 14th Street, the part where you see the banners and the bump outs and the benches with lights on them. We take that and do the next 2 blocks, but we describe what that is, and you'll find them there. And that's what you would, if you want to understand what that is, it's essentially the design workshop P Street design.
Isn't there also $1 million that the city helps direct in addition to the 1.3?
There is a $15 million that could be a potential bond. And in the event the resources are such, developed by this project, either at the beginning or over time, the city would have a resource to use a bond for that purpose. And let me tell you, it would be expended in the project area. And if there is a place in the project area that we would be particularly sensitive about, should those resources become available, they would be the P Street design elements on the south side of the street. While there aren't very many on the Grand Man's block, there is on the YWCA block. So that while we can do the P Street design on the side of the block that this building is on, and Embassy Suites is on, we hope for the time when we can do the matching set of design on the south side.
Do you have, from all the past experience on P Street, a decent, sort of placeholder amount for those kinds of improvements? I mean, is it too much to expect that they couldn't get done? I mean, or that they could get done based on the past bills?
The P Street design is more intense than others generally, but when we've done streetscapes, depending on their level of complexity, they've varied between $150,000 and $300,000 a block face. So if you were thinking about that, if we use that rough justice guess, we might be looking at that kind of a number.
Okay. Carl.
Yes, Mr. Landis, where will the entrance and exit to the lower level parking garage be?
There is an entrance on P Street. It's between the bank building that you know that's on the edge of the block. And now you'll know there's some concrete between that bank and the Lincoln Journal-Star building. Mm-hmm. I believe I have the orientation right when I think I have one more picture that describes it or shows it. Let me see.
Here's Sally.
There we are. And here, if you see these wall faces here, they show the entry point that goes down to that location.
And is the exit from the same location?
I'm not sure there's another one. Yes, okay, both entrance and exit.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Cindy?
Thank you. So I had a question about the tax allocation bond, because that will be city's bond rather than the developer getting a bond from an outside lender, is that correct? I think that, so it's,
Do you mean the $14 million bond?
yes.
The $14 million bond will be developer purchase, and developers here as is bond counsel, and they can describe that for you. The city issues the bond in the sense that we create the bond, but we do not stand behind the bond as we would with a general obligation bond or a revenue bond.
So it just uses our borrowing?
That's right. We are the creators of the bond. We have the authority to create the bond, but we're not a bank. What we do is we create the bond, and essentially the bond gets purchased, and then the bond holders are paid back over. The bond holders are paid back over time by the taxes that are paid on the structure.
The reason that I asked is because last year I was told that actually the tax allocation bonds, which are generated by the city, are smaller bonds, and this is kind of a larger bond.
This is a larger bond. That's right. It uses the word tax allocation because the mechanism that pays back the bond are the taxes that are paid by the developer. So I think that's why the phrase is used. What it's not is a gift or allocation of our taxing resources, like our, the bonds that we pass for roads or the like, or even the revenue bonds for the parking department.
Thank you.
John?
I got a little confused on who the bondholders and everything are. At one point, you said this is a developer purchased amount.
When I say that, what I mean, it's a phrase that we now use to mean that the city has no obligation to repay. Our taxing authority isn't at risk. Our general fund isn't at risk. In the event the bond doesn't, if the revenue stream doesn't generate enough for the bond, either the developer makes up the difference or the bondholder suffers the loss. But no taxpayer is influenced by any outcome of the arrangement. So when we use that phrase, that's the status that we're referring to. Sometimes the developer, in fact, does buy it themselves. Sometimes they get a lender. But when we use that phrase, we're really trying to say, it's not us.
Is there a way to have future distinctions? Because I guess I've always understood all along, and probably they've been smaller tax or developer purchase bonds where the developer itself has internally purchased them. At least that's been my understanding, as opposed to using an outside lending source.
I'll see if I can make a note on that, John.
There's something there that, because that way the risk is totally gone.
It is a shorthand that covers more than one situation, and in a sense, I think we could be more particular in the language we use.
Marion?
This project adds a lot of density to downtown in terms of residential housing, and of course there are parking requirements that go along with it. Could you just touch base on what the overall impact on parking downtown will be? Will there be new stalls available for public use at least part of the day, or can you speak to that issue?
I think some of the parking below grade will be used for retail purposes, but I'm going to turn around and look to see if I've said that correctly. I have. In other words, some of those 100 stalls below grade that they will build will support retail, which means when you as a customer want to use it, you'll be able to go down there. But also some of it is meant for the users of the building. And remember that we have residential, office, and retail. So in a sense, some of those below-grade stalls will add to the kind of parking that supports local retail business. The net effect over time is an impact at maximum of 340 stalls, and those are called against the garage that we have on site. It begins with 50 stalls for commercial use and 70 stalls for residential use, and phases that in over 18 months. It also recites that we have no obligation to ask somebody who's in there now and under a contract to leave that contract. So we wouldn't, ended in that case. There's a normal attrition over time in a garage. As people change jobs, as students come for 1 year and then graduate, or go to East Campus, or matriculate someplace else. So there's a natural follow-through. What's going to happen is we will gradually hold back the stalls for the natural attrition rate and have them available upon the completion of the building.
Okay, John?
You bring up the Marketplace garage. Do you know what the current occupancy is or what it's ranged at?
It is the least occupied of our garages, but all of our garages are well occupied.
So where, if there's this attrition and the project takes those over those 345 spaces, and is that the total capacity of the garage, or is there
375, I think, is closer to it.
Okay,
But
an extra 30. So it takes
we're darn
over-
close, yeah.
So it takes over the lion's share.
The lion's share is fair.
Where do you anticipate those people will go to find parking?
Many of them will be moving on, doing something else.
But there'll be
Of
some
all the
coming
garages
behind.
we have, this is the one that's used most specifically by university students, who are a notably mobile group. Students that probably should be on campus in a university-purchased garage, because those stalls, in fact, are stalls that we could use for downtown residential and retail as well. Look, we're glad to have business. We're glad to have the stalls occupied. But I would say that it's heavy in the use of students, which is a mobile population and does change over time. The attrition rate is high. And I have to say that I certainly hope that the university bears the lion's share, to use your phrase, of finding parking on campus for student parking.
When you say it's heavy on student use, do you know what percentage? Or
Our
what numbers?
parking manager, Wayne Mixdorf, is here. Perhaps we can call him up a little bit later and ask him that question.
Okay.
Okay. Someone else like to testify?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the council, my name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street here in Lincoln. Appearing before you today on behalf of City Center Lincoln. I apologize that my client couldn't be here tonight because of the travel arrangements last week. They couldn't make the plans for 2 Mondays consecutively. A little bit about the developer first. City Center Lincoln was formed by Newman Development Group, which is based in Binghamton, New York, in upstate New York, up near Ithaca. So one of the first questions I had for them when they called me is, why Lincoln? What brings you to Lincoln, Nebraska? The Journal Star Printing Company site is amongst several sites that the parent company has a downtown location that have a lot of value. And the Journal Star Printing Company has been trying to market those downtown sites, or the parent company has, and Newman visited all those sites, and of all those sites that are available, really selected Lincoln as the best location for their type of mixed-use project, primarily because of two principal reasons, one of which was location. The proximity of this site to the Haymarket, the investment that the city and developers have made in the Haymarket make it very attractive for Newman Development Group. Its location on the P Street corridor is very attractive to Newman. Its location in proximity to the University of Nebraska is very important to Newman, and likewise, and lastly, the fourth reason is primarily the proximity to the city parking garage and the necessity of that city parking garage to make this project work. So those location factors certainly were the primary considerations for Newman to come to Lincoln, Nebraska. The other one was really the need. One of the questions everyone has, can City of Lincoln support 238 residential downtown living units? And I can tell you, Newman has thoroughly vetted that question and engaged the Danter Group out of Columbus, Ohio, that provides market studies for multifamily projects all over the country. And the Danter Development Group went through its analysis and all of its metrics that it measures and really determined downtown Lincoln could support more than 1,200 dwelling units right now based upon jobs and et cetera. And based upon those factors, Newman Development Group said that this is the best location for our resources that we want to develop in the near term. And its project is a high-end rental project. The 238 dwelling units are high-end rental units, not student housing. This is 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and studio apartments with a high amenities, bike storage with an on-site mechanic, fitness room up on the upper level, up on the rooftop, other rooftop amenities and gathering spaces, and pet-friendly policies and facilities to encourage their residents to actually lease in this facility. On the overhead, you will see the, as Director Landis indicated, the entryway view of the project coming into downtown Lincoln. It does consist of the 90 to 100 stalls on the lower level, the 35,000 square foot, which is retail level on the first floor. The second and third floors will be contain 88,000 square feet of Class A office space, and then floors 4 through 9 would be the 238 dwelling units with the rooftop amenities above that. This building is designed by WDG Architecture out of Washington, D.C. They design multifamily and mixed-use projects all over the country. They're really intrigued by all of the factors that are involved with the site, and I think it's going to be a very handsome addition to downtown Lincoln. I did want to address a couple other issues. This is the P Street corridor, and that red car does show the access to the lower level. And then the parking issue. I do want to talk about the parking issue. The north side of P Street right now, you may be aware, has diagonal parking. The developer has faced the tough choice on whether to retain that diagonal parking or convert it to parallel parking and expand that sidewalk availability and that sidewalk space to create more outdoor dining areas, and that was ultimately the determination by the developer. It'd rather sacrifice, reduce it. I think it's going from approximately 14 parking stalls right now to approximately 8. There will be a loss of 5 to 6 based upon the preliminary design, but that is outweighed by the addition to 90 to 100 stalls in the lower level. And the developer really determined that the outdoor additional opportunities for the dining space would trump that issue. The parking garage, the marketplace garage, is what I put on the overhead is really the phase-in schedule, and that's really tied directly to the anticipated lease-up of the residential units. 238 dwelling units. There's obviously not all units would be leased on day one. And it's anticipated that over an 18-month time period, that schedule would permit not only the developer to lease the stalls available for its residents, but also assist the city in the parking management of the parking garage to tie that attrition to the lease-up of the dwelling units themselves. I also wanted to mention the tax increment financing. This redevelopment agreement does authorize a $15 million tax increment financing component, $14 million really devoted to the redeveloper purposes of the project, and then as a note B, $1 million for the city. And just so you know how we came up with that number, the $14 million is really tied to a pretty conservative estimate. The investment is over $85 million in this facility, but the tax increment financing component, based upon our projections, conservative projections, we tie that $14 million to a $68 million valuation. And that's the reason that we actually tie a note B in there, because we know that that appreciation will occur, that value will occur over a period of time, and perhaps provide additional debt service on the note B to be retained by the city. Director Landis is correct. The uses are typical for a downtown project: site acquisition, asbestos remediation, site demolition are a big component. Additional component includes the facade. If you look at the exhibit, when we were negotiating, and one of the things I wanted to mention, we were in front of you back in May and with a redevelopment plan, and it's taken us until this point to really get through all of the details necessary that really brought this project to the finish line. And ultimately, there's approximately of that $1.32 million amount devoted for streetscape and intersection improvements, $800,000 is what we consider to be the on block, the P Street, the Q Street, the 9th Street on the block on the adjacent sides of the building. Other than that, the developers can be writing a check to the city for other components, and the city can do those additional improvements, including the west side of 9th Street at its own time schedule. In addition to those uses, we also envision energy enhancements. The building is going to be very energy efficient, and then we do have the capitalized interest component. The last thing I wanted to cover with you today is really the schedule. And I do ask for combined second and third readings because of the schedule that we anticipate. Under the community development law, you may be aware that there's 30-day remonstrance or a waiting period, that once that period is passed, a redevelopment agreement authorizes the issuance of the tax increment financing note, and that's what we would like to be able to achieve, to have that remonstrance period expire on or about March 1. And if action is taken today, that would allow us to achieve that goal. because under the contractual provisions with the Journal Star Printing Company, they do have a requirement that the developer actually provide it notice. Journal Star then has a period of time up to 6 months in which to vacate, at which time, after which the demolition could occur. Hypothetically, it could be probably September or October before demolition could proceed. We think that may go quicker, but we would like to deliver that notice as soon as possible, which then would permit footings and foundations to probably go in the fall of 2018 and construction completion probably second or third quarter of 2020. So it's an 18-month construction schedule with a project this size. You can imagine that. So again, I would renew my request for a combination of second and third reading and request your support for this redevelopment and the other items on your agenda for this project.
Questions? John?
Mr. Houston, you mentioned that then the developers' representatives aren't here, so may I ask my questions of you?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll see if I can answer them.
Oh, I'm sure you can. I was starting to ask Mr. Landis earlier about the retail possibilities. You mentioned on sidewalk dining and so forth, so that would bring about restaurant, beverage establishments. I know one of the renderings had a bank logo or something that might be a possibility. Could you describe the flavor of retail and whether it's like restaurant based, or are we actually going to look at getting some retail shopping opportunities?
If we had 238 units leased up above, I think we're going to have much higher interest in the retail. But right now, I can tell you that the primary interest is from a bank. We do have a letter of intent with a bank, and there's strong interest from a restaurant that would be new to the Lincoln area, really for that 9th and Peace Street corner. They really liked that drawing. But that is the type of retail tenants that we're looking at. But keep in mind, 35,000 square feet isn't all that much, because that first floor does have the vestibule and lobby area for the residential areas that leads on the Q Street side, and then there's a vestibule lobby area on the P Street side for the commercial areas. So the net leasable area of the first floor is 35,000 square feet, which I think will go quickly.
So you're saying the net retail opportunity is 35,000? Because like I say, it's a bigger footprint.
Yeah.
Well, you know, a typical restaurant is often 5,000 to 7,000 square feet. So, I mean, there's still quite a bit there.
And there's a restaurant that's very interested in about a 10,000 square foot footprint in that corner. But that's all we have at this point. We're not in a position to announce any specific names, obviously.
Well, I just wonder, because you know, we've got a lot of the restaurants and bars. Is this going to be a true restaurant, or is this another bar? That's
redevelopment agreement obligates, it does not permit a true bar. It obligates the redeveloper to have a tenant that complies with the restrictions of the redevelopment agreement, which requires an active kitchen service within the facility.
What percentage of food sales would they have versus alcohol or beverage sales?
I believe it's in excess of 50%. It's been a while since I've looked at that precise issue.
Okay. On the parking garage, I had another question or two there, if I may. You've got the existing users there. I believe I heard Mr. Landis say there was an 18-month phase-in or what have you. So is there an actual date beyond which, if there aren't 345 stalls, that's all that the project would get, so that the city and its management of the garage can continue to lease to other people and they don't have to worry about being bumped? How does that process work?
Well, based upon this schedule, if substantial completion is achieved, say it's July 1st, 2020, the 18 months then would mean that by January 1st, 2022, we'd be in a position where the full ramp-in would be achieved up to the 340 stalls. I guess I added a year to it. Wouldn't it be 2021? It'd be December 31st, 2021 would be the end of the 18 months. And at that point, the 340 stalls will have been leased or not. And one of the things that we anticipate, but we don't know for certain, one of the things we anticipate that there will be fewer tenants actually having cars. And we think that's probable. We can't plan on that yet, and that's why we have to have the right to lease up to the 340 stalls. And it's pretty simple. The 50 stalls are really for additional employees of the office tenants, and then the balance of it's for the residential tenants. Is the parking stall mix, I guess.
Who bears the risk of unoccupied parking spaces? unoccupied?
Well, based upon the lease-up schedule, really Newman Development does as the ramp-up occurs.
So full ramp-up, though, in my understanding, you say wouldn't be till December of 2021?
Correct.
Then that's 4 years from now.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen is that if after 6 months, the parking schedule may say that after 6 months we need 180 stalls, it may be we only need 150 stalls. So I think it'll be adjusted accordingly based upon actual need. But I think the developer really has to have the ability to satisfy that requirement of the ability of their tenants to have a parking stall on site.
Well, I guess what I'm looking at, though, on bearing the risk, if you've got 180 there, you're saying that could be revised to 150 if they don't need it. But it seems like the city's being, and the parking department's being put at risk for that vacancy, because it's kind of hard to rent out parking if people know, gee, in such a time, this entity's going to come in and take it. So it seems like, is there not a provision that says at this point, the developer, the city center, has to take parking spots whether or not it's going ahead and subleasing them?
Well, there's two different ways to do that, and one of which is a master lease concept where the city master leases the entirety of the stalls to the developer, and then the developer subleases to their tenants. That's not the model we elected here. The redeveloper really has the right to lease up to that number based upon the unit count of the residents. And I guess I don't share that risk. I don't think or share your opinion of that risk, because I think it's no different than it exists there today. There are residents that there are tenants that are leasing parking stalls within the garage. That I don't think we're going to be in a position where we have the ability to remove anybody from that parking garage. It is based upon availability of the parking stalls within the garage.
And will there be open parking as opposed to designated spaces?
What we anticipate is that the redevelopment agreement does contain an easement to permit Newman Development Group to build a skywalk bridge at the 4th level, and all of the residential parking, we believe, would be at or above that level. And so we really believe that the parking stalls at 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floor will be more readily available to the public than the upper level stalls.
Are they going to be specifically marked, though, 24 hours? So it's still open so the city could get advantage of that?
Correct.
What happens on football game days or other big activities at the lead?
The residents will have to pay that freight. I mean, this is at city market rates. There's no break on this redevelopment agreement. There's no advantage to the redeveloper in that regard, but the city does differentiate its parking rates based upon availability for football Saturdays, and includes a premium for parking on those days. And the residents will pay that parking premium.
Okay, so where the city's charging $20, $25 for parking, then they would pay that on a football Saturday?
Correct. It's built into their parking rate.
Okay, Benny?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. You mentioned the 238 residential units, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms efficiencies with some additional amenities at market value. Could you tell me, will those all be available for lease, or will there be some lease purchase? And could you give me a general price range on that? I know we're looking out into the future, and this is just speculation.
First of all, none of them will be for sale. We may have to impose a condominium regime on this building of 2 units, the commercial, the office, and the retail being the commercial, and then additional unit of being the residential. But we are not condominiumizing the building, and the apartments will not be for sale. We anticipate that the rents would be in the $900 to $1,200 range, but those final determinations haven't been made.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item, these items?
Can I just ask Dave another question?
Okay, well, you have
Oh,
someone
no,
else come
after testimony.
Richard Halverson, 6311 Nimmerus Road, and I park in Market Garden, and I'm a student. Well, first, I'm disappointed the developer couldn't show up. I mean, we're giving him $15 million. You'd think he'd have the courtesy to take a short plane trip. But that's the TIF. Down there you have Graduate Hotel on one side, the Manse on the other, Hampton Inns on the other side, and I guess the city's saying the area is blighted. Kind of a high-class blight, I guess, if you want to say it that. But again, my main concern is the Marketplace garage. In New York City, I don't think if a developer went to the city and said, I basically want you to almost give me 340 spaces, they would probably get a chuckle. And I say, it's true you're saying you're not giving while we're renting, but still, when you think about the cost it's going to take to build a garage, you're basically giving it to them. The Marketplace garage has 385 spaces. According to the parking deal, 305 of them are currently leased. So already you're faced with a shortfall. You're going to have to, I'm going to say, I don't think all those people are moving on, to tell you the truth. So I think you're going to be short, a couple hundred spaces there. And that basically leaves no space at all for citizen use. If everything's leased, you won't be able to park there as a citizen. I know some are leased now because when I go to the Y, I use it, and I walk past like this $200,000 Audi about every night. I'm like, oh, okay, so he must be from the man. So it's leased. And I think I talked to parking and said, well, maybe we might build an extension over Q Street. Expand the garage that way. But I thought, well, for one thing, that's not been the public talk so far about we've been talking about building a garage, but we haven't got the specifics. Again, if we do that, that means the parkers who park in Lincoln are subsidizing an out-of-state developer. So again, that's my main contention, that we're basically given 340 spaces. They have they have to incur no development costs whatsoever. My solution, which would probably not sit well with them, would be like the student housing. They build their own garage or lot somewhere down the way and run a shuttle service. But like I say, I don't think they would like that. But again, I don't know how. Again, I would like you to somehow assure that there is adequate public parking there in Marketplace Garage. It appears now there's only about 80 spaces anyway, which appears to be sufficient because very seldom is full, except in, like I say, maybe state tournament comes down. But so usually it appears to be sufficient. But I'm afraid that's going to shrink to basically zero. Thanks.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, Larian has a staff question.
David, could you come back up? This is really just a process question for your department when it comes to these TIF projects, and this is a major allocation of tax increment financing. To what extent do you have a say in how some of the preferences that the city may have for first floor retail operations? Clearly it's a market-driven proposition, but we have a lot of cafes, we have a lot of banks. In terms of adding to the kind of cultural vibrancy of downtown, which is part of why the city's interested in investing in these projects and contributing in the way that it contributes, do you discuss with applicants the kind of variety we're trying to achieve, especially on P Street, which in the downtown master plan is designated as a retail corridor, and to John's point, was really supposed to be an emphasis on shopping and retail.
To the extent that it winds up in a redevelopment agreement, it doesn't work from the positive under normal circumstances. It works on the negative as to what we don't want to be there for retail. And we say there are kinds of uses that we don't support and that we don't want them as part of the project, and the developer agrees. There is some conversation about that, but I'd have to say that it's hard to direct and insist on rules when the market doesn't follow what you want. In fact, I think you find the difficulty that we've all just recently had with respect to the public market. And, we've tried to make that work, and it hasn't worked well, and we need to make some adjustment. But there, we did try to say, we have a vision for this, you have a vision for this, and we're going to stick in a redevelopment agreement. Now, what do you do when it's empty? Well, you've got an agreement that says you need to swim upstream, and no matter what the market does, you're obligated to swim upstream. I think it is a disappointment for most everyone that the return of soft goods shops and unique boutique shops has not been as forthcoming as we would all like. I think many of us would have liked to have seen the return of soft goods in the retail opportunities in the Haymarket in a way that it hasn't done. There are some soft good stores along the P Street corridor and the like, but what it hasn't engendered yet is a wide, a street like, I visit Madison quite commonly, and there's a street called State Street. It is small shop after small shop after small shop. And when you subtract the bong shops from everything else, there's record stores and CD stores and clothing stores and apparel and the like. And that's, I think, what we would most like to have happen. But if the market isn't going to come, you can't write a redevelopment agreement that will make them come. And if they won't come, then I don't think you want them to build portions of their building that sit empty. So we're caught, I think, in that way. The best thing that we do, I think, is to create the kind of fabric and connectivity so that if it was to begin, you'd have a canvas for that to be carried out. And to that extent, I think the P Street design has done that. But that's about where we are in the mix. We do not tell people what they have to put. We do tell them what they can't put.
Thank you.
Okay. John.
I'd like both Mr. Landis and Mr. Mixdor. And Mr. Landis, following up on what my colleague was just asking, as I look around, for example, we now, I believe under our downtown standards, require there be retail on first floor other than parking occupancy.
Our actual phrase would be active edges. And what we mean by that are offices or shops that open to the street, that have transparency with visibility, so that there is a constant sense of movement and observation. If you are walking on the federal parking garage block, you sense the fact that there's nothing, you can't see who's there. There isn't much sense of light. There's no sense of observation. There's no reason that compels you to walk down that block. And psychologically, what it does is it says, turn around, go get your car and drive this, because there's no reason to go on. But if there's a shop or a restaurant or a bar or something active, if you're being observed by people, if you're going to run into other pedestrians, you feel safe. This is the Jane Jacobs eyes on the street idea. And so while we say retail, what we're really talking about when we dig just a little deeper is that we're looking for active edges, whether it's retail or services of some kind or shops. And that's what we mean when we say retail.
Well, and I applaud you with that. And I also like your statement a few minutes ago about market-driven users. And for the 35 years I've been in the Haymarket, and we've always looked for trying to get the shopping type opportunities for people. It's very difficult in the way the whole economy has evolved in the retailing industry and the needs for parking. And so as we look at this, and I look at Latitude, for example, the student housing project there, basically empty windows in the first floor. In fact, a lot of the windows are filled with cars parked there, pending a tenant.
They had a restaurant at one time, and it didn't go, and it's still available, and the spot's there. There was a hope that there would be a grocery store, and they couldn't find somebody who wanted to move in and make a grocery store. That happens.
What I'd really like to say is I think we need to rethink our standards and what we're requiring, because the market is what's going to drive the reality. And there's only so many bars and restaurants you can have, and bars, and we're having a high mortality rate in those establishments as it is. And the turnover is it's incredible, and that industry has that. But there are also only so many mouths to feed or to sell a beverage to, except maybe on some really big event days. And then you compound that with what are the parking opportunities, and the downtown area has challenges, and it has challenges for the daytime traffic, let alone the other times, which I guess I really think we need to step back and think about it, because the issue isn't location, location, location. It's parking, parking, parking. And I learned that the hard way in the 80s, and that's just what it is. And so with that lead, I'll let you cogitate on that or digest that, Mr. Landis. But Mr. Mixdorf, talk to us about Marketplace Garage. You're wanting also to do a new master plan for downtown, and you say we need another West Haymarket garage, and we also need a Southeast Lincoln downtown garage, which is quite obvious. Here we're going to be taking some out of inventory, and I'm not objecting to it. I'm just trying to see where, if we get retail or restaurants, where are those people going to park? How are they going to get there? How are they going to get to the Grand Theater and these other establishments?
Well, it's a very good question. Wayne Mixdorf, Parking Services. Excuse me, I apologize for my voice. I'm struggling a little bit today. We have had, as Mr. Houston mentioned, we've had about a year to anticipate and develop a plan for moving forward with Marketplace Garage. We have a number of people parking there currently with monthly contracts. 305 is an accurate number. The gentleman spoke earlier, called Parking Services today to confirm that. But many of those folks are with some of our larger downtown employers, and we've begun the discussions with them about redistributing those folks as construction begins, because that'll be uncomfortable for some, and then further as the building comes online and occupancy of the dwelling units begins. One thing I would like to point out too, though, is that 50 of the spaces currently belong to Lincoln Journal-Star because they owned the land that the garage was built on. So they've had rights to the 50 spaces, and in fact we have them on a segregated floor, the lowest level below grade, with their private entrance. And so that will transfer with the sale of the property. So 50 of the spaces that we're talking about will belong to the development anyway. The rest of the spaces are primarily for the dwelling units. And this gives us an opportunity to change the mix at that particular garage. As we've discovered with University Square, for example, many of the people that have parking spaces there that live in University Towers are not there during the day, which gives us the opportunity to have significant transient parking sales, particularly during the lunch hour. It also gives us the opportunity to maximize what we would call our oversell in that particular facility. So we not only have a 409 space garage, but we're able to oversell that by 15% on a given month. Because we have an idea of the way in which people that are parking there are using the facility. Same thing we anticipate here at Market. Many of the people that will be parking in this garage will be parking evening, nights, weekends, which are the times when this garage is underutilized. We will be able to continue to meet the transient demand that's given to us by the university, and in fact we'll expand that because we will have greater capacity during the day. Right now, 305 people have monthly parking rights at that garage. All 305 of those folks park 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, because they are all downtown employees. So it will that will change. It will give us a different mix, and we think that ultimately that will be very beneficial to us. Now, in terms of moving the 305 folks that are currently parking there away from this garage over time, as I said before, we've begun talking to our larger downtown employers that have employees parking in this garage. They're open to moving to other facilities. We also have a number of students who park in that garage, but because they're dealing with us on an individual basis, I can't give you a number. But we do know anecdotally that we have quite a few students that park in that garage, and we will be able to decrement those over time. I don't think that we're going to have difficulty meeting the number. without expanding our capacity, but we also intend to expand the capacity. John, you had mentioned the possibility of parking garage in the southeast corridor. We've actually identified several properties that we would where we would entertain building. We have had property appraisals done on those as a first step to begin to determine what would be the best property to acquire to build that. We're also looking into the possibility of renovating an existing structure in that general 14th Street corridor. We have structural engineers who will be in town this week to be able to take a look at that facility to see if in fact that's feasible. If it is, that will give us another line of to pursue. That would allow us to recreate the 300 parking spaces at Market Place Garage in a shorter timeline if we're able to go in that direction. But again, we don't have enough information yet to be able to make that determination.
Is that one you're looking at renovating? That wouldn't create any net parking spots, would it?
No, it would not, but it would bring parking spaces that are currently underutilized into the city control, and we would be able to maximize those in a way that they are currently not, that the current owner is not able to do because of the condition of the structure.
Now, you mentioned you have 305 downtown employees under contracts, they're monthly contracts.
That's
so
correct.
You can do something there, although maybe with some of the organizations that rent a block, you may have some longer term, but we'll set that aside. Mr. Landis said, though, that there was a predominance of student parking, and so the university ought to provide for them elsewhere.
We do have...
Sounds like 305 out of 385 are...
Well, at the risk of contradicting my boss, we do have quite a few students that park at that garage. It is a minority number of them that are monthly parkers. Primarily, the university students that park there are transient parkers, and we don't anticipate losing them over time. This garage will continue to be open for transient parking at all times.
Now, on the university parking garage, you have agreements there with the adjacent condominiums where they have assigned parking 24 hours a day. And I thought I heard you say a moment ago that you've now found ways to free that up during the day. Did I understand you?
During the day, not during the overnight hours. Overnight hours, the residents are back. Not all residents are gone during the day, but we are able to maximize the transient opportunities at that garage.
You taking signs down then?
No, sir, we haven't.
So how does a parker come in? Because I've known several people have been towed, unfortunately.
People do get towed. No, the monthly parking opportunities there, the signed spaces, they have, for University Towers, they remain open at all times. Those are paid for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are other customers in there that have signed parking where we've been able to expand their parking, for example. Federal education is one, and we've been able to park more of their employees in the same number of spaces because
they have the signed areas as well.
They do. They have signed spaces as well. They have 100 signed spaces, or 55 for them, and we've been able to park a greater number than 55 in those spaces. Again, it's because we began working with them, determining when their employees are actually working.
Now, will you have any signed spaces in Market Garage?
No. That was, the signed spaces in University Place are based on an agreement from a number of years ago, and we've, over time, discovered that that was not the best agreement we could have made, so we will not be assigning individual spaces in any of the garages again.
Okay.
Not in that fashion.
Except for those 50 underground that you have spaces chained off.
They have the rights to those, yes, sir.
Now, you also did on some of the Arena Way parking there on some of those garages, you do have chained off areas too, though, so those would be dedicated 24
hours. By redevelopment agreement, there are some segregated areas in those garages, that's correct. They are paying a premium for those spaces.
Speaking of payment, that was my last area, is what, we talk about market rates here. You've got football Saturdays and everything, so under current rate schedules, if I'm living in city center, what would I pay to have that, including football days, because I don't want to move my car?
Well, market rate currently at that garage is $65 a month. By the time the garage, the development actually opens, I anticipate that being higher rate. Football, downtown residents pay a $10 premium per game over and above what what they're paying for their monthly
Is that year-round, they pay that $10 extra?
It's only during football. Most people come in and write us a check at the beginning of football season, and that covers them for the season. We then put a stamp on their proximity card that identifies them as monthly parkers. There are other agreements in other garages, in the JPA garages, that dictate a different pricing method, but by and large, people are paying something on the order of $85 a month as a premium rate for reserved parking.
Now, when I went to the Chancellor's Tailgate at the Leeds Center this fall, I walked by and there was a $20, $25 sign there at Marketplace for football parking.
Mm-hmm.
So
that would be for day of game. Yes, sir.
Why would you sell it to $10 for a resident? That's not market rate.
Well, that would be over and above the amount that they're already paying.
If I came in and wanted to rent 100 spots for a football Saturday at $10 each and resell them at $25, would you let me do that?
No, sir, because I'm not going to ask the residents to leave their parking space over the weekend.
Set them aside. I mean, I see a little entrepreneurial opportunity here. Get my attractive colleagues here to stand out there with the sign and make a $15. I mean, that's
It's only for our downtown residents, sir. And we would not, we want to put them in a position where they don't have to leave their parking spaces during football, but yet they are still paying a little bit extra for the right to stay there.
But the point is, when we're told market rate, they're really not paying market rate.
That is the market rate in that is what we charge them. So we have established that market for downtown residents. So if they're parking with a city facility, that's what they're going to be paying. That's the formula that we use.
Like $10 extra a month, so just make it the same and they'll save on administration.
Per game, not per month.
Make it $10 a month. There's 7 games a year, so they're getting a deal. They're not paying quite $20 a Saturday.
Similar formula like that is used in the JPA garages. That was developed in later redevelopment agreements with Olson and Associates, for example. A formula similar to that is used.
I don't mean to belabor the points, but we've been a lot of meetings.
Yes, you have.
But you are. Parking is critical to our citizens, and I want to see the ability of P Street and all these other developments succeed and maybe get the shopping opportunities. But if we don't have that and on an equitable basis, it's hard. And to be able to have revenues to pay for new garages. I'm done.
Cindy?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So I just have a really one question, I think.
Certainly.
So there was some conversation about attrition of parkers, and you had indicated that the students are largely transient parkers, and I understand that you don't necessarily have a count of that, but do you have an idea of how many new parking passes monthly passes are being issued on an annual basis? In other words, where we have some going out and some coming in?
Correct. That I can get that information for you. I don't have that at my fingertips. We have established a date of whenever the redevelopment agreement is signed. We would stop taking new parking customers, monthly parking customers at Marketplace Garage at that time. Right now, we do still take some. I don't have the numbers for you. I'd have to get those and forward them to your office.
I appreciate that, that you're not going to stop until that date, and I think that's fine, but I'm just curious, how many can we expect to see in attrition on an annual basis?
No, and it's a very good question. I wish I had the information for you, but I will get it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Carl.
Thank you. One quick question that relates to this project. Okay. The below-grade parking.
Yes.
Will that be operated by you and your department? Or
No, sir, it won't be. At least it's not anticipated to be at this time. That parking below grade is for the customers and of the first floor retail, and also for the office tenants. Should that change at any time, we certainly would be amenable to operating that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've had some staff questions, and do we have a rebuttal from the developer?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I just ask one more question to Mr. Landis?
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Hi, thanks for coming back up.
You bet.
I'm looking at one of the pages of the document, Exhibit B, which we referred to, and of the agreement, and it talks about the total available annual TIF generated over 14 years as 14 million, and I see that we're actually considering something for 15 million, and I'd just like you to explain the difference if you don't mind.
Sure. There's an A bond and a B bond possibility here. We anticipate and know, and the developer has worked to find the financing to do the $14 million, based on a conservative estimate of the valuation. We're authorizing the possibility of that last $1 million in a bond to be done at some future date, should we wish to do so, when and if the resources produced by the taxes on this property would make that a viable opportunity. So you'll hear the number 14, that's the bond that we would predict would be in the short term. And then you'll see the last $1 million, which I think you should see as a future opportunity over time, should this produce a revenue stream greater than is necessary for the $14 million bond, and that we could use for civic purposes
So
in
you're
the project
hedging your
area.
bets.
We're hedging our bets.
Tell me what city purposes?
When we say hedging our bets, it's that we're creating a resource for the future. We're not hedging our bets in the sense of not doing something, but we will wait till the day when the bird is in hand, and when we know the bird is in hand, we would have a tool to use to exercise that revenue stream for the project area. So not much difference. Yes, we're hedging our bets, I guess.
To get to the point that Cindy's making, you would have that $1 million authority to bond for civic purposes inside the TIF district. How big's the TIF district?
It includes this block, and it includes some rights of way on 9th Street and 10th Street and P and Q Street. If in that area there's some place that glaringly looks to be an opportunity, thank you. It would be this block, which is the YWCA block, and this is the Grand Man's block. Not their properties, but the sidewalks, the trees, the silva cells, the curbs, changing from parallel to angled parking, things that we might consider doing at that time, we would then have the resources to do.
Okay.
Larry? That's why I was asking about the 1.3 versus the one earlier, and because they're all talking about streetscape improvements, what we would expect in the first phase and what should, based on past costs of those kinds of improvements, we might expect should that additional $1 million become available, trying to get a sense of manage our expectations about what we can expect to see come to life.
If I look at this, in the event we hedge our bets and the chickens come home to roost, is that enough metaphors in one place?
That's enough.
We would work here, first of all. And then if we needed something else, we would work here, so that we could take the P Street corridor and execute as much of that design as possible.
And when would you know? I mean, 2 years after the project is built, 3 years?
That might be a little early, but yes, you could get a feel for that. Here's a critical piece of news, and that's how much does the assessor put at the assessed value of this property. There have been times when we've guessed and guessed wrong, both up and down. The assessor's math is of their own creation, and there are times when we're very pleasantly surprised, and there are times when we say, well, let's hope that grows.
That's what I meant by hedging your bet, because in case it comes in at a valuation higher than you anticipate, you would have that available.
That's true. Now I think we're using the same language for the same situation. That's right.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Houston.
I think I'll pass.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. Next item, please.
All right, next I'll call items 29 through 32. Annexation 17007, annexing approximately 70.01 acres of property generally located at O and North 112th Streets, an annexation agreement for Dominion at Stevens Creek among the city, Louis Daraska, and James Buell regarding the city's annexation of property generally located at North 112th and O Street, change of zone 17015, application for a change of zone from AG agricultural to R3 residential and O3 office park, and special permit 17022, application of Mark Hunziker from the Planning Commission's approval of a special permit to allow Dominion at Stevens Creek community unit plan for up to 433 residential dwelling units, including single-family units and townhome units with requested waivers on property at O and North 112th Streets. I will note for the record that we did have a request of the applicant to continue public hearing to February 5th.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we continue the public hearing to February 25th on items 28 through, or I'm sorry, item 29 through 32.
That's February 5th, right?
February 5th.
Right.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Cindy. Discussion?
Do we want to see if anyone did come down to talk on this item first?
Well, we'll vote on this, and then we'll ask if they want to talk about it. Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. And yes, if anyone is here to testify on this item tonight, they can. Otherwise, the public hearing will be held next week.
Okay. Very good. Let's go into the voting session.
All right. If not, we can move into the voting session then. All right. Item 19 is approving Bodegas Alley as a Keno satellite site at 1418 O Street, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 20 is the report of claims for the period of December 1st through the 31st, 2017, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 21 is the operating agreement between the City Parks and Rec Department and Friends of Woods Tennis governing the ongoing operation of the new Woods Tennis Center facility for a 10-year term, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 22 is naming the new dog run at Peterson Park as Stransky Dog Run, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Go Dogs. Call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Public hearing ordinances second reading and related resolutions are items 23 through 32.
Okay, can we handle the city center redevelopment now at this point?
Sure can. Do you want to
We
make
need-
a motion to suspend council rules to have second and third reading
that
on this
motion.
date?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion on items 26, 27, and 28. We go ahead and have third reading today.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
So we'll now vote on those items?
Yes, so item 26 was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 27, authorizing the CIP for the $15 million in TIF funds. This was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then item 28 is authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Ordinance's third reading. Item 32 is text amendment 17020. This is amending section 27.69.260 of the Lincoln Municipal Code to revise the sign provisions for non-residential health care facilities and post-secondary schools, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
That was a stereo second.
Wow.
We'll give it to,
Yeah.
moved by Leary and seconded by Benny.
Okay.
Discussion.
We're paying attention down on this.
Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion. Item 34 is annexation 17023, annexing approximately 21.16 acres of property generally located northwest 48th and West Holdred Streets, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Leary and seconded by Carl. Discussion? Carl?
Yes, just real quickly, Field of Dreams says if you build it, they'll come. Northwest 48th Street has been needed for a long, long time, and we built this road, completed it about a year ago, and already we're seeing annexations and improvements that are going to happen out there. Housing, commercial, industrial development, it's a good thing.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 35, change of zone 07063B, application of Ring Neck Development to amend the I-80 West Lincoln Business Center Planned Unit Development for a change from AG Agricultural to R3 Residential PUD and H3 Highway Commercial PUD for Planned Unit Development designation of said property, and for a development plan which proposes modifications to the zoning ordinance and land subdivision ordinance to allow for a mix of commercial and residential uses at Northwest 48th and West Holdridge, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Leary and seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 36, application of MWH Leasing for a change from AG Agricultural to I-1 Industrial at South 21st and Saltillo Road, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Leary and seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 37 is text amendment 17019, amending section 27.02.240 to revise the definition for warehouse by including wholesale and distribution centers in said definition, by amending the manufacturing, processing, storage, and distribution use group described in section 27.06.180 to allow warehouses as a conditional use in the H3 and H4 zoning districts, and to strike the wholesale and distribution centers as a use, by amending section 27.62.150 relating to manufacturing, processing, storage, and distribution use group to describe the conditions required for warehouses located in the H3 and H4 zoning districts, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Leary and seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 38 is annexation 17022, annexing approximately 11 acres of property generally located at South 84th Street and Augusta Drive, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Leary and seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 39, change of zone 17034, application of Newmark Golf LLC for a change from AG agricultural to R3 residential on property generally located at South 84th and Augusta Drive, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Leary and seconded by Jane. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge, Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Our resolutions on first reading are items 40 through 53. On item 45, we did receive a request of the applicant to delay public hearing to February 26th.
That was 45?
Yes, sir. That was the request from Kent Seacrest for Berean Fundamental Church. The pastor's out of country until February 26th.
Need a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'd move we delay item 45 for hearing until February 26th.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Ordinances first reading are items 54 through 64. Our pending list are items 65 through 70. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at the open microphone session, which tonight is one.
Would anyone like to speak? Please come forward. Are you coming forward, sir?
Public comment now?
This is
Yes.
public comment. Yes, it is.
Now.
You're welcome to sign in after you testify, sir.
Thank you. My name is George Wolf. I live at 1226 South 25th Street. I'm a 78-year-old gay man. 4 years ago tonight, John Taylor, my partner of 40 years, died. Shortly after we met in the early 1970s, he was fired from his job as assistant manager at a local grocery store when its owner discovered John was openly gay. Lincoln City law allowed the owner to do so. 4 decades later, it still does. In 2012, the City Council adopted a fairness ordinance protecting Lincoln's citizens from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations based on sexual orientation and gender identity. A successful petition drive at the time suspended the ordinance and required the council either to repeal it or submit it to an up or down vote by Lincoln's electorate. Almost 4 years have passed, and neither the 2012 City Council nor any succeeding council has done either. There's no way of knowing with assurance how many people employed in Lincoln, like the waiters of a restaurant in town some years ago, have lost their jobs for lack of protection against discrimination. Nor do we know how many employees in the city have had to hide their sexual orientation or gender identity for fear of being fired. Nor can we be sure of how many out-of-state businesses have chosen to shun Lincoln for its lack of fair and equal protection. Any is too many. Which brings us to this City Council, whose intent to do the right thing is embodied in its September anti-hate resolution. That resolution states that the Lincoln City Council will lead by example in promoting safety, security, and respect for human and constitutional rights, including the human rights of community members who are vulnerable because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. You have stated your values and your intent. Now you are being asked to act on those values by finally placing the 2012 Fairness Ordinance back on your agenda, by voting to put it before Lincoln's electorate on this November's ballot, and by championing the campaign to achieve its victory. Thank you.
Are there questions? Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Would anyone else like to testify this evening? Please come forward.
Thanks to all of you, the members of the City Council. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Kathy Lohmeyer, and I was born here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I was raised here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I live here, 1625 Garfield. I'm a Lincolnite, but in my life I have been fortunate enough to been able to travel a lot. So I've seen a lot of the world. I've been all over Nebraska. I've been all over the United States. I've been to several of Europe's great cities. I've been to Canada, Mexico, Jamaica, the Bahamas. I've really been lucky to be able to travel. But I guess you could say I've been from Stonehenge to Carhenge and every place in between. I lived in Tennessee for a while, tried another state, but I brought my family back to Nebraska. And I brought them back because I wanted them to grow up Midwestern. I wanted them to grow up with the same values that I grew up with. And those values to me are respect for each individual, the willingness to help your neighbor and treat them with respect, and the understanding that when you're given something to do, you do it as best you can with your best ability. And I think these values are embodied in that 2012 Fairness Ordinance. And I'm here to ask you, the City Council, to put that Fairness Ordinance on the November 18 ballot. I have relatives, I have friends, I have neighbors who are gay. My values can't bear the thought that anyone could deny them the opportunity or the chance to make a living, or deny them a place to live just because of who they love. That makes absolutely no sense to me. And I doubt that I'm the only Lincolnite that feels this way. In fact, I was doing a little research. 2016, the Pew Research Center did a study, and that found that nearly 9 out of 10 people in the U.S. know someone who is either gay or lesbian. And that can be a mix of family, friends, neighbors, coworkers. There was another 2016 survey done by Nebraska Education Telecommunications, NET. And this said that 74% of Nebraskan respondents to that survey favored laws that protect the rights of gay and lesbian people and protect them from employment discrimination. And I have copies of where I got this from. I don't have 7 copies, but I have several, and I know that Councilman Eskridge has maybe a link to it, and if you don't remember getting that link, I can resend it, or George can. So, you know, this isn't just things I'm making up. This is real people who have been surveyed within the last couple years. So now I understand there's lots and lots of factors in making a decision such as this. I did the research, and I saw the petition drive that negated this ordinance. So I know there's a lot of passion in this issue. But I personally think 4 years is long enough for our families and our friends and our neighbors to wait for these protections. In 2014, the Human Rights Campaign found that Nebraska's LGBT respondents, they were reporting over 20% of them having experienced workplace discrimination.
1 minute.
42% reported that they had experienced harassment at the workplace. How can we tolerate this as a city, especially when you're trying to do magnificent things? There's only one way to find out what the city of Lincoln really feels about equality and tolerance, and that is to put this ordinance to a citywide vote. I know there's opposition that thinks the city doesn't even have the right to create such an ordinance, but let's have the debate, let's have the discussion. Let's pour a big bucket of water on the fire of ignorance and misinformation. Lincoln can't sit with the shadow over our heads as citizens and with a weight on our shoulders. Weight on the shoulders of our LGBT community. As I told you in my opening remarks, I've seen a lot of the world, and Lincoln has just as much to offer as some of these beautiful cities of the world. It's a fantastic place for business and culture and sports and food and family, friends. I'm almost done. There is every reason to believe that it could continue to be prosperous, strategic, and make tremendous contributions to the well-being of our state and our region. So let's put an end to this lingering doubt about our ability to embrace and protect all of our citizens. There was a recent death of a young woman, Heather Heyer, who was marching for tolerance in Charlottesville, Virginia last summer. We owe it to her memory and to ourselves to stand up now and work to pass this ordinance in our own backyard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lohmeyer. Are there questions? Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak this evening? Please come forward.
So you're welcome to sign that after you testify. We'd appreciate it.
I may be the guy you've been looking for since 1730 local time today. Chairman Christensen, members of the council, for the record, Gary Aldridge, ALDRIDGE, 7112 South 45, 68516. Ash trees are a natural resource, so I'm told. Emerald ash borer, not so much, so I'm told. I'll come back to that. I'm an elected member of the Board of Directors, Lower Platte South Natural Resources District. I speak here only for myself. Belmont Elementary School, 18 January 2018. An open house to provide information and collect or solicit comments from citizens, taxpayers, the owners, on a comprehensive watershed master plan. Some attending, Lincoln City staff, Lower Platte South staff, Councilman Eskridge and Shobe, County Engineer Dingman, County Commissioner Brinkman. 5 Lower Platte South directors. I was one of those 5. The participation of all was helpful. Lower Platte South is pieces and parts of Butler, Saunders, Seward, Otoe, Cass, and Lancaster County. 10 subdivisions, each with 2 elected. That's 20. 1 at-large member. Total elected board, 21 members. Each of you is in a sub-district. Sub 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the donut around Lincoln. Larry Ruth and I are the 2 elected for Sub 4, east of Lincoln, south of Lincoln, and southeast of Lincoln. Excuse me. The NRD board handles business through committees. A committee will recommend action to the board. I serve on recreation, forestry, and wildlife. I was seated in January 2017. At that time, the FY17 budget had been approved. Now I'm going to shift gears. LB 71 was introduced in calendar year 2017 by Pansing Brooks. LB 71 appropriates funds for certain tree recovery issues. The target is emerald ash borer, EAB. The City of Lincoln has an interest in EAB. LB 71 had a hearing in the Natural Resources Committee. Now back to the Lower Platte South. Committees began constructing a budget Committees began constructing a budget for FY 2018 in May 2017. The proposed budget for rec, forestry, and wildlife had a program described as, quote, monitor tree mortality due to insects such as emerald ash borer. For FY 2018, that budget figure was 0. The budget figure for FY 19, 20, 21, and 22 is 0. I challenge that lack of funds by asking, is EAB not a concern or a valid activity for an NRD? The FY18 budget was tentatively approved in July with $0 for EAB. I was a smidge unhappy with that action. The FY18 budget resolution came to the board in August 2017 for final approval. I made a motion to amend by adding resources as needed for EAB survey and eradication.
1 minute.
This was only for activity on land owned or controlled in some manner by Lower Platte South NRD. My motion to amend was ruled out of order. That ruling, I think, was incorrect. The final FY18 budget was approved 16 yes, 1 no. The no vote was by Aldridge. My purpose to modify by adding funds was to tell the city and the owners Lower Platte South has skin in the game. If EAB is the disaster some predict, and EAB causes a die-off of ash trees, ownership does not matter. It seems to me we are all in this together. It seems now others thought otherwise. Thank you.
Are questions for Mr. Aldridge? Thank you. Does anyone else like to testify this evening?
Mr. Chair, seeing no one coming forward, I would move for adjournment.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold? Yes. Motion carried, 7-0.
We're adjourned.